How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest. In fact, I'm joined by a returning guest and a coach he's been there, he's done it, he's got the t-shirt from doing it all. Today, I am joined by the one and only Dan Reeve. How are you doing?
Good, thank you, mate. Good to be back.
Yeah, good to have you on again. It was great chatting to you last time. Obviously, still been following your content and what kind of you've been up to. But for everyone listening, yeah, how are you? What's been happening in your world recently?
Yeah, I'm well, mate. I became a father this year, so that's a pretty big deal,
Congratulations.
I suppose. Uh, in terms of like things changing. Uh, Outside of that, I'm a process of uh, written a book recently, and I'm in the process of developing a certification on conditioning. I feel there's a bit of a gap in the market, and it's something that obviously, from my perspective, I've flown the full range of like the conditioning spectrum from your like max strength stuff and your very short distance things to the sort of ultra distances with a Deca Ironman and things. So and pretty much everything in between. And I felt like there was a gap in the market. There's something missing in terms of I see the conversations I have with coached all the time is always about marathon plans, marathon blocks, 5K blocks, and strength has like periodization. Strength has plans and things where you build out over years. And I've invested lots of money in like learning from the best in those sort of things. But I couldn't see anything from a conditioning standpoint that built these sort of systems out. So I've been deep delving into those things about the research and reading lots of books, and then hopefully putting a system together that I think can really sort of like change the game for coaches and like help them have the similar frameworks as there are to strength. So yeah, that's where I've been recently, mate. Anyway.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure we spoke beforehand about the topics that I had in mind for the episode, and we'll dive into that a little bit more. But how have you kind of found, writing a book, putting all kind of like your own experiences, what you've learned, what you've read, down into a course and a book? Because I know probably more so from my side, but I'm sure everyone listening would be or the coaches listening would be interested as well. You spend a lot of time working with athletes, clients, explaining things, but then to put things down into, a certification, a book. How have you found that challenging? Has it been enjoyment? Has it been a mixture? Has it been because obviously, I can with all the other things that you're doing as well, and especially becoming a dad, I can appreciate that there's a lot there on your plate. How have you kind of found that balance and maybe doing something a little bit different with what you're doing with the certification and book?
Yeah, I think it was something because I've been coaching coaches since 2014. I've been doing it pretty much mainly all I do since about 2022. So for the last 4 or 5 years, and it's been conversation. So I've done seminars on this. I've done webinars. I've done different like videos and podcasts, like trying to help because it's a question that comes up so often. Uh, and it just meant that it was like, right, I need to actually go deeper into this because this is something that coaches need. And the book actually wasn't the original plan. The certification was the thing that I started building because I felt like I'm very good friends with the guys over at Kilo, with Stefan and with Porik. I met up with Stefan in the summer, and I said to him, "You guys need to do this because, like, you have systems and rules and like for the long term, and this is something that's not there." I've done Joel Jamieson's conditioning course. I've done Altis's courses, and I've done Exos's courses in conditioning. But the thing is, they're methods that are short-term methods that are a week or a month or maybe a 3 month period, and that's it. Whereas I'm dealing with people. I have clients who are 8 years, 5 years, 6 years. You need like systems that are going to go for longer than that, and you need to build out these things, particularly when you've got hybrid athletes, which I know something we're going to talk about. There needs to be like something that's actually a framework to help these people. And the certification was the thing that I started building, like a way that I could do it. And because it's from zero, it's actually quite easy because you can start at the lowest level and you can set your own values and your own principles. And as long as you're then taking into account what's scientifically shown, you can build it out in a way. And like I've been trying to like develop a system that's very similar to what like a strength system would be, about how it would develop over 12 months, 24 months, an Olympic cycle. And then all I did after that was just break down the sort of principles and the values and the laws that I had developed myself for the system into a book. And I made the book not about me at all. I made it about the thinking behind the system.
Yeah.
And if you agree with the thinking, because I think critical thinking is something that's lost in this day and age. I think we now just have information at our hands that people don't think any deeper than that. They think that that is understanding, but ultimately they're not questioning what they're reading anymore. They're just taking a workout and they're just doing it. So I wanted them to think in a certain way before they then went into the certification. And obviously, doing 100 pages of a book is considerably easier than doing 700,000 pages of a certification, which, trust me, is going to take a lot of hours of filming, but it's pretty much there, ready to go. But it just needs to be now, just like filmed and put out there. But yeah, it was a long process, but it's something I've been thinking about for such a long period of time that actually, once I got into the flow of it, it flowed pretty well. And it's like you can hear, I'm probably now in my voice, I'm passionate about it. And it's just meant that, like, when I've had spare time, it's been like, right, straight into this, like, get it down, like, do this. And then you have to keep going back and reversing it. I think there's been probably 15 or 20 iterations of it. And I've literally got everyone saved, like version 1.0, 2.0. And it's like 20.0 is like the final one. But it's like, yeah, it's been a real passion project. I actually really loved it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, nice. And I suppose, at that stage where, like what you said there, there or thereabouts, a book being published as well, I bet it's a good feeling having that kind of final product from everything that you've put together.
Yeah, absolutely. And like with all these things, like I'm not. It's about creating, like, particularly with having a son now as well. It's like it's about creating legacy as much as anything else. It's having something that outlasts you. Like one of the things that both scares me, but then also like actually pushes me more than anything is that people always quote that there's no one's going to know you in 100 years' time. And like the rebel in me is like, right, fuck that. I wanna make sure that I'm leaving something that's going to be outgrow me and outlive me, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't want to be just like left. I think there's plenty of good guys and there's plenty of good women in the world, but there's not many great ones. So like I'm going to set my bar high, and if I fall below short of it, then fine. But at least I'm going to try to go to that level as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's that phrase. I can't remember the phrase. Is it if you shoot for the stars and land on the moon, you've kind of still
Exactly.
you've still achieved something awesome. So, oh, cool. And you touched on it there about diving into hybrid training, fatigue, and all those sorts of things. And I suppose just to kind of start the chat off, you mentioned there, the systems for strength, but when it comes to conditioning, maybe there's not there's other systems. You've mentioned the other courses that you've done there. And then, this can fall into that bracket of hybrid training. It seems to be, whether you are interested if you hear of this as well, but sometimes there's like buzzwords that fly around. I'm a hybrid athlete, it's hybrid training. And it's kind of beyond that, what does that actually mean? Because people are doing quite a mixture of different training, but not really understand maybe the purpose or what it looks like, if that kind of makes sense. So I suppose from your side, what is the definition of hybrid training? What does that actually look like for people who kind of hear this word, or coaches that hear this word but don't have that further understanding of what it is, rather than it just being, yeah, I do a bit of running and I do a bit of lifting with it as well.
Yeah, this is it, isn't it? Like it does get thrown around a lot. I like it and I don't like it, depending on who's saying it and depending on what mood I'm in, to be honest with you. Uh, it is like, if you look at what hybrid is combining two elements. And like for me, I then will define those two elements as like some physical components, which will be the gym related stuff. So your strength, your speed, your endurance, your mobility, your coordination, those types of things where you're potentially lifting a barbell or a dumbbell and you're building those sort of qualities. But then I'm looking at the other side of things where we're looking at the body systems and we're looking at like the neuromuscular aspect of things, the cardiorespiratory aspect, and then the energy systems. And I'm looking at those two as my things, of the two elements I'm combining. So I'm not combining running and lifting.
Mm.
Like there's more to it than that. So I'm looking at actually what are the components within these two things that we're putting together. And like that can then mean so many different things, so many different things. And ultimately, does it come down to what we would have called fitness previously, where you're doing some of this sort of stuff and some of this sort of stuff? Yeah, absolutely. But I don't mind it being defined as an actual name as well, because I do like the word hybrid and I do like the word this sort of like whether it's hybrid work or it's hybrid like training, like it is a good way of combining the two things together. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But it's the definition of it. It's not like you said, it's not just you're a powerlifter who goes out for a little jog at the weekend. That's not a hybrid athlete. It's for me, it's when it's actually structured. It's actually structured. There's something you're actually working towards on both sides of those sort of fixtures.
Yeah. And do you think from the coach's point of view, the trainer's point of view, do you think that's probably the main kind of like mistake that they make, that they just don't have that structure? It's just a case of, right, we're gonna plan out all the strength training side of things, like what you mentioned with the barbells and the dumbbells, because there's those systems there. There's that longer term plan, if you like. Whereas when it comes to the energy systems that you're using and all the other things that you mentioned, whereas do you think they just don't know how to structure that? It's maybe a lack of knowledge, or just maybe a lack of understanding of how to partner them together so they get the end result that they want for the client or the athlete, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of them both. I honestly do. I think there's like, I think with any training program, you've got to have an outcome based at the end of it. Otherwise, you end up just accumulating random like traits and random sort of like fitness qualities. So ultimately, there needs to be some sort of like actual fixture that's going to build out that yearly, whether it be a yearly thing or whether it be a macro cycle or just a 12-week thing. But the plan has to exist before the training does. That's the key thing. And I think ultimately, sometimes there's no underlying plan longer term. Like, as in, for me, until I've developed this system, I've had somewhere where people are going from a conditioning point of view, but it's been a little bit more vague than it is now that I've been doing this for the last year or so. Whereas underlying, no matter what conditioning goals somebody had, whether it be a marathon, an Ironman, triathlon, etc., the strength periodization was always going on in the background. That was already built out, and that's going on for the. I know in general where they're going to be in a year, 2 years, 4 years time. I can pretty much go right. I could tell them where we're going to go with this, and that's just there. Whereas from a conditioning point of view, I was being, I would say, a little bit more reactive, like in previous years than what I am now. Now they're running much more parallel together. They're complementing each other considerably more, where they can complement each other, and the frequency of both elements are moving up and down with the seasons and cycles of the athlete or the client's goals there. Whereas it might have been like a bit more like we know concurrent training does like can get in the way of each other. And I think previously maybe they were butting heads a bit more than what they definitely are now. They're definitely much more fluid now. And it's definitely much better. And I think that's what like coaches struggle with, because ultimately, like I used the example before of a powerlifter just going for a few runs. Like, okay, cool, great. In process, that should work because they should complement each other. But if you put them in the wrong timings, at the wrong stages of the week, in the wrong volumes, then it's going to massively, like, they're going to hinder each other. So we've got to make sure that it's not just one program and another program just amalgamated together. It's going to depend massively on what the athlete can do and what their goals are in that particular period of time.
Yeah, definitely. And with that, when you're talking about partnering those things together, is it because that people have or coaches have thought of them as like two separate things, and maybe there hasn't been enough information out there? Because it's a little bit like what you were saying. This has been something that you've been thinking about for a long time. Developing the certification, the book coming out there. Is it just a case of it was a people's thought processes of training a little bit, and like what we said at the start, thinking a little bit deeper about it, because the one thing that we don't want is it to be like when you said there about being reactive, is getting to a point where one impacts the other, and then all of a sudden, those that momentum or that progress is then slowed down, and then we're then trying to solve a different problem as opposed to getting that plan in place at the start, like what you said before.
Yeah, I don't think this been as big a bit as big a problem up until maybe the last 3 or 4 years anyway, because I don't think people were training this. People have been training this way, but they haven't been training to the extent that they are now, as in with your hierarchies, with people the up. I think with hierarchies there has been an uptake of running as well. People are now taking on much bigger running challenges than they were previously. This has been something, obviously, from my background, something I've been doing for a long time and training this way for a long time. But I think it's becoming more mainstream now, and it's meaning that the coaches who are mainly working with general population, who are just mainly fat loss clients previously, are now actually working with these types of people because it's becoming more of a thing. And ultimately, there hasn't been a need for this style of training because there hasn't been the sports and the people haven't been taking on these progressive goals that they are now. Like, and I just think it's an evolution of fitness in general. Yeah, have people been able to do this? Yes, because I was one of those people doing this back in the early 2000s, but it wasn't shouted about that back then. But now it is, and actually, back in 2000, I fucking got through by being a pretty good athlete generally from a genetical standpoint, and like probably doing things. If I did it now again now, I'd do it a lot better.
Yeah.
But I sort of like winged it. Whereas now, you don't want to be winging things with your clients. Like your client is paying you. I was doing it myself back then. Like it's fine for you to experiment on yourself, but you don't experiment with your clients. You want systems and you want like to understand how this actually works. And there hasn't been these things available to people. So therefore, like it needs to be created, I think.
Yeah. And with that, and this might be a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's quite interesting from what you've said there. Like what I mentioned at the start, you have buzzwords and trends. High rocks has become huge. There's actually I don't know whether you've heard of it or not. It's called the Primal Race,
Yeah.
which is basically like a high rocks format, but it's a 400-meter run rather than a kilometer run. There's like a sandbag carry and like a tire flip and that sort of stuff. So high rocks esque, but
Yeah.
just different events and a different run. And do you think that capitalizing on this style of training because it's become so popular, that and more kind of general population clients are thinking, oh yeah, well, I wanna do that. I want to give that a go. That there'll be more events like this and more kind of people wanting to get involved. So it is a case of, well, like when you said there about, there's a little bit of a gap that coaches, trainers need more kind of knowledge on that, as opposed to, you said there, people are doing a lot more running or a lot more training, a lot more variety of training now, but then that can lead to, injuries, impact on the actual results that they're getting. Um, can you see kind of, yeah, more information, more coaches trying to um, create more structure and wanting to use that certification and help them get involved in other events that might come up. If that kind, I know I kind of like spoke a lot there, but if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. I don't see these things going away. And like, I think if we're both probably honest, that actually it's a great way to train.
Mm.
Like for general health, you're lifting a little bit, you're building your cardiovascular system as well. So you're building muscle, you're building strength, you're building your cardiovascular system, you're doing it all in one. That is like longevity there. That is going to make you a better, more robust, resilient human being. So that's like a massive positive thing. And the more general population people can get involved with that, the better, as far as I'm concerned. I don't see these things going away. The difference is that now these things are there's levels to what you can do. Like you can put on classes for this, but it's like that's like you can put on classes for these things, but there comes a point where if you go and do a CrossFit class or you go and do a powerlifting class or you go and do an Olympic lifting class, there's a point where you outgrow the class and you then need to have individualized training to work on your weaknesses, your strengths, to then develop yourself as an athlete. So those are great things, to get you. And what I always call it the difference between exercising and training. Like these are great to get people exercising. But when there comes a point where you're training, it's then the client then needs something more. And this is where there can potentially be a gap in the coach's ability to actually coach these things to the next level as well. Because it's not just about throwing things together. Things will interfere with each other. The solution isn't just removing one stimulus, it's sequencing them correctly. And like that is the difference between them wasting a block or actually making like progress over those sort of 6, 12 weeks, whatever happens to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting you said there about classes, and this is something that um probably I've maybe seen more having been in Thailand, the fitness street, in Phuket, something I've never really like seen before. It's you can throw a stick and you can hit any type of gym. It's an awesome place. However, sometimes when you look in, we've mentioned about the High Rocks, the primal race that I mentioned, and the amount that people train is a lot more. People will go over there for a month. I've even spoken to people that have been over there for 3 months, and the amount of increase in volume of training that they do is crazy. And sometimes it's a little bit of a case of, are they just beating themselves up? Are they just kind of like, or are the sessions, not the sessions, the classes that are planned are kind of just there to be like, well, if we make them lift a little bit, if we tire them out a little bit, that encompasses a good workout. And we've touched on it a lot throughout this chat so far about systems, creating an adaptation. When does it get personalized? And do you think that's where kind of, I'm not sure whether it's from the coach's side or the client side, where things get a little bit blurred as to be like, oh well, I've lifted stuff and I've done some cardio stuff, and I feel like I've worked really hard, whereas actually it's just kind of, well, no, you've just done loads of stuff, but there isn't you've just spun your wheels. You've not actually been able to move any further down the road. What's kind of your thoughts on that? Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, well, I think like when you go into a class, when you're catering for that many people, there's only like you can make them progressive. You definitely can, but it's going to become progressive to a point where then it's going to have to something's going to have to change. And the problem that you've got, particularly in probably places like that, is that the clientele is going to change all the time.
Yeah.
So therefore, you can't suddenly have this progressive training program that started with like a nice base sessions where you're building like technical ability, and then you're layering intensity over a period of time, and you're bringing in some density and volume, etc., as you're changing. And then somebody random just comes in 15 weeks down the line and you've been building to this point and then gets absolutely destroyed by it and there's the potential for injury or heart attack or whatever. It's like you can only take a class so far if you've got different people that are coming into it. So it's a tough situation, but ultimately that is the bridge between then going from a class where you've got a responsibility for a huge group of like very much varying abilities and where you're exercising ultimately to then going right now you're training because you can still train in pairs or in a small group, but then now you're training where actually you're choosing a stimulus. There's a set signal you're trying to send to the body to get a response out of it, and you're going to get that by doing this. Like what my issue is, and like I've used this analogy a lot recently, is like you're going to go and do like a strength workout. You're going to do 3 sets of 10, and when you go in what load pretty much probably you definitely would know what you're going to lift for 3 sets of 10 on your squat. You don't go in and go, right, I'm doing 3 sets of 10, and then you end up hitting 3 sets of 5. Yeah? If you go 3 sets of 10 and you're pretty much 1 to 2 RPE, 1 to 2 reps in reserve, you don't end up hitting 3 sets of 5. But that happens in conditioning and in classes all the time because they're not controlling how hard they're meant to be working. So like strength has a set percentage of your 1RM that you're going to lift for those things. And the conversations that you're having as a leader, as a class instructor, or as the guy who's giving out the conditioning need to be as clear as 3 sets of 10 and 3 sets of 5. Because you would never make that mistake in the gym and if you're going on a barbell. But This happens on someone doing their 1K sprints, on their 800-meter repeats, on their in their high rocks classes all the time, where the wrong signal is being sent to the body. Therefore, it's a complete waste, not a complete waste of time. They're getting something, but if that then transpires into the next week, the signals are all over the place, and therefore the stimulus is gone. Whereas if you've gone 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 10, and you've maybe increased by 2% per week, it's perfect. You've then made progress. Whereas if you've gone 3 sets of 10, 3 sets of 5, 3 sets of 6, 3 sets of 8, you've gone all over the fucking shop. You don't know, and that's where you're exercising, and that's the difference between the two. So what I've tried to help is like go, right, there's actually rules to this. There's something that we need to do. And I feel like that's something that's been missing, and not through any fault of our own. It's just that people don't know either. People
Yeah,
haven't educated enough to actually understand that there is a difference between these two things.
yeah. And what would kind of be your approach to, for the coaches listening of, actually implementing that? Because I think that's a really good analogy with the strength with the strength side of things. People haven't, the people know about percentages, RPE, reps in reserve. What would kind of be the practical applications for the coaches listening, and as well on top of that, managing the fatigue of their athletes and clients? Because exactly, tapping into what you said there about the strength side of things, you can be like, look, we don't want to push the strength that much, because everyone's had it. I'm sure you've had it with clients and athletes as well, where people have overshot. You've been like, right, we just want to, an RPE 7 or whatever it is, and then they've gone in, loaded it up, and it's like, whoa, like we don't need to do an RPE 10 on that. But sometimes, with maybe the conditioning cardio side of things, it's as though it needs to be you need to be flogged. It needs to be like that high intensity. Whereas we've already touched on it. There's energy systems that we can use for that. It's not kind of this is the only thing that we use. So what would kind of be the practical applications that you would give to the coaches and athletes listening?
Yeah. So my thing would be that is that when you like we just touched on there, from a strength point of view, you can test to a degree if you want, but what you've also got is you've got a set percentage based thing that you can work out where you're at from a 1RM perspective. You've got structural balance ratios for upper bodies and lower bodies. You've also got these things for aerobic and anaerobic training. Like, so what I'm saying is that you need some sort of baseline workouts that you can then use, because ultimately, like, this is where the book is called Conditioning is Not Cardio, because people are confusing conditioning with cardio. And like, conditioning is the deliberate development of a physical capacity. It's the deliberate development, just like what you're doing with your strength training at the same time as well. It's a signal-led process. So if you've done some sort of testing beforehand, you can then work at those certain percentages or speeds that you've been running at, or heart rates that you've been running at, depending on what you've got available to you, that you can then make sure that you're giving the client, which is exactly what you would do in strength training. You would, before they go, you'd give them one cueing, but you'd also give them advice and general sort of like rules of your RPE, of your RPEs or of your reps in reserve, etc., that you would do. You're doing exactly the same thing. It's like, this should be repeatable. This should be a repeatable process next week. Same with your strength program. It should be a repeatable thing that you do next week. If you do 3 sets of 10 this week, you should be able to do 3 sets of 10 next week. You can keep it the same weight, but it should feel a lower RPE. Yeah. Same with your conditioning training. When you go to do this week, you don't have to. The thing we've got here is that, from a conditioning element, is that what we do probably in strength training, 99% of people, maybe a few less, is that you add intensity. You add 2% intensity. The problem with conditioning is when you add intensity over time, the signal will change. So it will go into a different energy system. So therefore, the levers that we're going to pull are more likely to be a volume lever or a density lever, whereby we're bringing things in tighter. Because if I change the stimulus by adding intensity, I actually go from working threshold to actually now a VO2 session. And suddenly the signal is then changing. So I'm saying, do not add intensity. When you go for that bike session that I did this morning, last week it was 5 sets of 8. So I did 40 minutes worth of work in threshold. This week was 6 sets of 7. 6 of 7, so 42 minutes. The difference was, though, is that I had 3 minutes. Like, the volume is very almost the same,
Yeah.
but I had 3 minutes rest for the 8 minutes, and I had 2 minutes rest this time. So the density is compacted. I've done more threshold work in a smaller period of time. So actually, if I'd have added intensity, that heart rate would have drifted up into a VO2 session. So then the signal would have been completely lost. And this is the difference whereby there's a few elements that actually, hopefully with me explaining it, is pretty straightforward, just like it is in strength as well. But we're not thinking of that when we're programming in a longer term basis, when we're trying to protect signals. Like, you need to build like we would do in strength. You need to do sets of 12 and sets of 10, sets of 8 before you go and do sets of 2. Because a beginner who comes in and go, right, let's load the bar up for 2, they're either going to crumble underneath it, or they're going to be so undertrained, so scared of it, they're not going to load it up very much anyway. So you've got to have that linear periodization to a degree before you then start to play around with it. And the other thing, you've got to learn the rules before you break the rules. It's the same thing with strength training. If you don't know the rules of like conditioning, you can't go and break them. So you can't pull the intensity lever and the volume lever at the same time until you've got to a level where you're ready to pull those two levers. You need to pull them in the right order to then actually learn how to then pull them to actually break the rules in the future.
Yeah, I thought I'm a big fan of an analogy, and I really enjoyed that whole sequence about there. Yeah, I thought that was a really good explanation of it, and just kind of what I really like there, and that's why I said kind of like conditioning and cardio, because I think earlier we spoke about for the general population, people getting involved in this training, because I see it as, when you're conditioning, from when I played rugby, from other coaches that I've spoken to, the outcome of this, for strength, for the conditioning, is a performance. So whether that is you have to lift a certain weight in a powerlifting or a weightlifting competition. The conditioning side of things is what your 5K time is, marathon time is, whatever anything is in there. And do you think that's where the confusion is because the coaches or the people that are getting involved in this are coming it from these people that were just kind of like general health and fitness clients, speaking at it just as like a beginner level, and being like, well, yeah, they were doing this before. They were doing strength training and doing cardio, and it's just kind of like, well, yeah, we'll just throw a little bit more in, rather than being like, look, they might want to do a high rocks, they might want to do some form of performance, or it might be a case of there might be an athlete or an amateur athlete that then wants to progress up the leagues, or something like that, and they're just using the wrong systems, and just being, I'm only pulling one lever, that's it, this is the only one I understand, the only one I know, let's just work harder, as opposed to that linear periodization which you can do with strength training.
Yeah, I think like you said, there's probably a lack of depth of knowledge there in those some of those areas, whereby if you don't know any better, you do the best you can do until you know better. And like, I think there's a lot of coaches who are doing the best they can do,
Yeah.
and that's through no fault of their own. But what we're just trying to show, and like what so many of your guests would have done at the same time as well, is you're just trying to educate to the next level, maybe make people curious enough to then go and explore a little bit deeper, to then be able to actually provide a better service for the clients and better results for their clients and better results for them, to then attract more clients in the future at the same time as well. Because ultimately, it's all good, the social media world that we live in, but because it's such short attention spans, people speak about workouts and methods, and that's it. The problem is, these are mainly going to be the fanciest, most advanced things that Deborah down the park on a park run doesn't need these type of workouts. It's the same, like, we'll always go back to the strength analogy because everyone understands them. It's the same as bringing in Gary, who's like been to the gym 3 times, going, right, Gary, we're going to wave load you and we're going to do some clusters today, okay? Let's fucking crack on. Rather than doing 3 sets of 10, no, we're not going to do straight sets. We're going to cluster you to the death today, okay? It's like, there's so many ways it can progress before you get to that stage, that you've got to earn the right to do these type of advanced methods. You earn the right to get there, because otherwise you're stealing the gains that those advanced methods work that give you.
Yeah.
And there's no point like using more than a minimal effective dose to take somebody forwards. But the problem is the world that we live in, that's all we want. We want shortcut, we want the fastest answers. But the problem is that those things are then more likely to cause injury and issues down the line as well. So we've got to just be careful. That's all. Like having these types of goals, like it should be about performance. It should be about throwing yourself into high rocks. It should be about these things. But we just need like a simple system that just brings us through that and just doing the least amount we can do to continually move ourselves forward, rather than pulling all these different things or only having one way. It's like if you've only got one way and you've only got a hammer, then you're only going to use a hammer. That's absolutely fine, but realize that hopefully we're going to open your eyes up to the fact that there's also chisels and saws and all these other elements at the same time as well. Going right down the analogy fucking road.
Yeah, yeah. That's it. I've opened a can of worms now. I must admit, yeah. Because yeah, on a little bit of a tangent, there's the team a team of coaches that I work with. There's Australians, Italians, and what I find really interesting is just like the different analogies that they use and their approach to it to explaining things, which I absolutely love because especially for 10, 12 years, I only really coached around the north of England, so you get used to kind of like the same sort of thing. So yeah, and as well. When I use analogies, I always feel as though I use the same analogies. So sometimes I'm always talking about a car, and I'm like, I'm not even that bothered about cars. But yeah, I agree with that because the working within, your understanding of it. And it's kind of like, I've always been a big believer of, and this is the whole reason why, I wanted to have you as a guest on the podcast again is, I am just learning that little bit more, being able to develop that system a little bit more, which then ultimately impacts the clients, the athletes, and just increases that standard or level of that level of service with and I know we've kind of touched on the strength and the conditioning side of things. We said right at the start that hybrid training encompasses speed, power, all those sorts of things. And one thing I kind of wanted to touch on, because we've said about performance, we want to create adaptation, and everybody will have things that they are naturally stronger at, something that they might have already been doing. And from what you've said there about people think that doing more is always going to be better. Pulling that intensity lever, just work harder. Feel as though you've walked out of a session feeling though you've done everything. Whereas actually, is it a case of you need to get the maximum out of speed, power, conditioning, strength, or is it a case of actually, again, analogies in my head, you've got a row of buckets. Actually, um, he or she's already pretty strong, so we don't need to fill that up anymore. But they're lacking a little bit of speed, or they don't have the conditioning base for repeated outputs of power. Do you think that's something, because that's especially when I worked with a couple of rugby teams that needs analysis at the start. Do you think that's something? Again, this is something that I've spoken about with other coaches as well. It's kind of people bypass the things that are already out there. The information's already out there, and everyone knows. Oh yeah, I need to do it. I need analysis and sort it out from there. But they actually skip to the thing of let's just do all of these in the program, and it'll be an awesome program, and they'll really enjoy it. As opposed to we're going to dial this back a little bit, push that a little bit. What's kind of your take on that, if that makes sense?
Yeah, there's so many different like periodization methods ultimately, and like what you mentioned there, where you're doing everything, or where you're being more sequential about things, like or where you're going from block to block and you're like really focusing on things. There's no right or wrong. It's just what system works for you and what you're happy with, and ultimately it's like what is best for the client. How do they like to learn? But like what I've learned from like 26 years is that ultimately we test, we train, we retest, we repeat, we cycle everything. Like that's not a philosophy. That's actually just a system that's running in the background all the time. And everyone's going to have strengths and weaknesses. Like we just have to like look at what it is the goal that the person is working towards, and then over time, I always speak about it from a educational point of view from a coaches because I speak to so many coaches. But you've got all these different buckets that you need to know. You need to know about. You need to know about anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, like strength and conditioning. You need to know about like nutrition. You need to know about all these different areas. Like your actual just coaching in the readiness for change and like psychology of coaching. And like you need to upskill yourself in all these areas. There might be things that you enjoy more than others, but like if you want to be the best coach you can be, you have to bring everything up at the same time. And it should be the same thing as an athlete, because if you're neglecting mobility or you're neglecting like your aerobic base, then ultimately those will be the things that will catch you out in the end as well. Like you can be as strong as you like, but if you can't get around, you can't move, then at some stage, particularly as you get older, like I am, something's going to break. So we have to start to bring all these play all these different cards and like bring all these like different levels up. And I think if you want to be a general, robust, resilient, like strong human being, then you want to be building all these different things over time. And again, like I said, how you do that, you can touch them all over, like every single block, and you can do a little bit of everything. Absolutely fine. You can bring these in and you can periodize them and undulate them, or you can linearly build them and you can go from block to block periodization. You can do it in many, many different ways. But ultimately, you just need a system that's going to like look at and go over all these things for you. And then it comes down to how much you can tolerate. Like, can you tolerate higher level intensities of this and lower level intensities of that? And that's the fun part of it from a coaching perspective in terms of like programming this out for that individual based on their readiness. Because like, ultimately, that's what it's going to come down to their level of tolerance of fatigue that they can take and the stresses they've got in their life. And resting and having rest days and like I would say deloads to a degree, like that is part of planning training as well. Like yeah. I know fatigue is something you wanted to like touch on at the same time as well, but like we have to take that into account. We have to look at like fitness will always be masked by fatigue. So we have to plan in those rest periods at the same time as well so we can actually get better. Otherwise, training, we're just going to be training and just like in the end, we're just going to be in a bin.
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of coming kind of like full circle, if you like, because like what you said there, people want to be robust. They want to be able to take on different challenges, and that is definitely something that maybe I have, in my opinion, kind of seen from especially seeing so many different nationalities, people, backgrounds come to the gym that I work at in Thailand. It's called Titan Fitness. It's kind of moved on from that thing of I'm a bodybuilder, I'm a CrossFitter, I'm a powerlifter. People still want to do that, but it's a case of, I want to do a powerlifting competition. I also want to run a 10K or a marathon. I want to be able to do that, which is especially not competing in as much powerlifting now. It's kind of like, I just want to be in that position where if somebody says, just from a general life point of view, do you want to go do this? Yes, I do, because I've got a certain level of fitness that I can do that. I can do a certain level of strength. And do you think that's going right back to the start when we said about hybrid training, that actually it's just people, or the take of fitness is people just want to be fit, be able to do different things rather than be categorized as a power lifter or a CrossFitter? Do you think that has been kind of a shift, if you like, and why hybrid training has become the new trend?
Yeah, I do. I honestly think that is the reason. I think people just they're now open to like just taking on the different challenges and like getting out there and just like Hyrox has been. I think it's combining a lot of things that people just enjoy. Like it's giving people that sense of community whereby you're training with a group of people, like you're in a gym where you're doing a class, but it allows you to compete at something that is repeatable. It's not different all the time, which was where potentially the CrossFits and things like this of the world do well, but then also fall down because the competitions are different all the time. Whereas when it's a repeatable process, like you've got something to measure yourself against all the time, therefore it's going to be much easier for you to then fall in love with the process of like getting better. It also combines travel. Like they are the competitions are all over the world, Europe, etc. So it allows people to combine lots of different aspects of their underlying values. And like we mentioned before, I think it's just come to the fore more now than it has done previously. People have always trained this way, and people have always wanted to be just fit, and they wanted to be able to throw their hat in a ring on any particular day. It's just that now there's actual competitions that by people who probably were fit, who now just wanted to make something that actually people like themselves could go and do, and they've realised that this is what most humans are fucking want to go and do as well. So I
Yeah.
don't see them going away. I see them only getting bigger and better for a period of time. Then it will narrow down again because that's how seasons and cycles of life and of the fitness world in general. But they're not going away for a long time yet.
Yeah, definitely. And I know we touched on about fatigue, but again, going back to what you said at the start, people have been training like this before, but maybe doing a little bit too much or experimenting from there. Whereas,
They still
you
are.
know, yeah, there's maybe more that information of how to manage that fatigue, and on that topic, because there's more information out there on it. Do you think it is just a case of um people listening to that advice, to that knowledge, and actually putting things in place of recovery? Because I know when you're speaking with people, the more you can recover, the more you can then um progress from what you've done, as opposed to just constantly being like bang bang bang. I need to do it because there's so many elements. I need to do all of them, and I need to do them all of the time, as opposed to like what you said, rest days, a deload, manage those things a little bit. Is it just a case of people wanting to? Um, is it just a case of people need to implement those strategies?
I think there's a lot of people like right now getting by on future losses, if you know what I mean. Uh, they like adaptation doesn't happen in the session. Like you create the stimulus, adaptation happens later on.
Yeah,
Therefore, you need a period of time to actually have recovery to then super compensate and for your body to either grow or to move on from the stimulus and the signal that you've sent it. If you're doing too much across the week, the body's not going to know where it's being pushed or pulled. So therefore, like I said, fatigue doesn't resolve by resting, it resolves by planning in the rest. And that's how adaptation happens as well, by planning in your week, the weekly structure, the weekly architecture properly. And I think there's a lot of people right now getting away with that. But not just getting away with it, they're underperforming. They're still maybe performing well, but they're not performing as well as they could be if they were doing it properly.
yeah,
And there comes a point where you can throw volume to a degree and you can throw intensity to a degree, but then genetically you're getting away with it because you're just a good athlete underneath. This is definitely what I did in the past. I've just got away with it to a degree, but I could have done it better. And I think there's a lot of people out there who are in similar boats right now.
yeah, yeah. I think that's a good point because yeah, if you've been training like that for a while and you're already kind of like fit and strong, it's like, oh, I'm just going to keep pushing this. Whereas they're kind of like setting themselves that limit of, well, where could you be? This is the thing when you're thinking about the levers that you pull
How
in.
better are you getting better? Are you actually getting better? Like, when was the last time you actually got better?
Yeah,
Like, that's another question as well. It's like, oh, it's all good, but are you actually, is what you're doing, like when I said about having this system of train, test, train, retest, repeat, and just go around and around and around, is that process working for you? Because if it's not, then you need to address that process and you need to start doing something different because it's clearly not working.
absolutely. Yeah, still being able to do all these things, but just doing it at the same times or the same weights. There has to be progress at the end of that, or progress to be seen.
And if
Um,
you haven't, and then again, sorry to butt in again, but it's
no.
again, if you're winging it, you are progressing, but then how do you know what's made you progress? Because the other thing as well is when you have a scientific experiment, you're only going to change one variable, or you're going to change maybe one or two variables because it's a controlled situation. If your training plan is literally splat shotgun approach where it's just fucking everywhere, what's made you better? Like, what was it? Was it those couple of VO2 sessions you put in? Was it the volume of the aerobic stuff you put in? Was it this? Because if you're pulling, like I mentioned before, so many different fucking levers in all different places, like what has created it? Because you haven't got a system then. It's just been fucking, I've just thrown everything at it. And that's not a system that's going to create longevity. So people can like get by with those periods. But again, I would say to them, because I do work with a fair few high level of these hybrid type athletes, if you're just winging it, you're exercising still. You just happen to be like a genetic freak. You're still exercising. You're not training because there's not a system behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's and then they'll just end up keep doing that same thing because they don't know what's working, so then they'll just keep doing that.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of topics, content, information in there, Dan. I always it's same, when we spoke before, I always feel as though there's lots of different kind of like rabbit holes that we could go down, from yeah, how you kind of approach the topics, which yeah, I could listen to for a lot longer, but conscious of time. But the as per the previous episode, the last question that I like to ask from everything that we've spoken about there, and for everyone listening, what would be your take home points or words of wisdom, Dan?
I think like the train test repeat would definitely be retest repeat would be a huge take home for everybody. Like I think if you do that on a short term basis, or you can do it on a really really long term basis. Like I think if you don't have a guideline and a benchmark for it, then no matter what you do in between, you don't know where you are at the end. The second point would definitely be there needs to be a system to what you're training. You need to play around with one lever before you then, and if you understand that one lever, then you can start to break the rules and you can play around with other things. And then off the back of that, it's like, do you actually have a system for your conditioning side of like training? Like, is there something that you're actually following whereby if I asked you what the principles were underneath it, are they there? When you write a marathon training plan or a roadblock for a 2K row, or you've got someone doing a sportive on a bike, is there an actual system that you're following where you're developing, sending the right signals for the right energy systems to actually develop over time? Because I know there will be. I know there will be definitely for strength. I know there definitely will be. But are you having those conversations, particularly if it's a coach? Are you able to have those conversations about RPEs and reps in reserve for 5 lots of 1K intervals? Because if you're not, then there's still a bit of guesswork going on there.
Yeah, two good words of wisdom and take on points to finish on. Thanks again, Dan, for taking the time to jump on. For everyone listening who might have any questions about what we've chatted about, want to see the content information out there, the book that you published as well. Where could people find you or reach out to you, Dan?
Yeah, they can find me on Coach Dan Reeve on Instagram, or they can find me on the Reeve Conditioning Institute .com, and there's the book, and there'll be the certification and stuff there as well.
Awesome. Well,
RCI.
thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on. Like I say, really enjoyed catching up with you today. Some really good content information in there. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will catch you all at the next episode.